everyone. I'm Chelsea Tornetto with At Home Author, and today we're going to talk about story arcs, particularly how picture book story arcs might be a little bit different than the traditional plotline you learned about in elementary school. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe for more great content about publishing children's books. Okay, so a classic story arc looks something like this. You have an exposition, rising action, a climax, falling action, and a resolution. And this pretty much works for most stories. We're taught it all through school. It applies to pretty much any story that you read, any novel, any short story. And the exposition is basically the introduction. It is where we meet the main characters and we are introduced to the setting. It is the setup of the story, it sets the scene. The inciting incident is what kicks off the action of the story. Typically, in picture book world, we describe it as the introduction of the conflict or the problem that the main character has to face. Then you have rising action, where the main character tries to deal with that problem, whatever it was that the problem that they're dealing with, and eventually they get to the climax. So the rising action is where you're struggling. Climax is where that problem is solved or the main character has changed in some way. It's often called the turning point. And then we go to falling action and resolution. Falling action is where we kind of see the effects of that climax, how things have changed since that happened, since that turning point. And then the resolution is sort of the ending or wrap up of the story. Sometimes it's a happily ever after, sometimes not, depending on the story. But it's sort of the wrap up, and it leaves the reader with that satisfied feeling of, a good ending to your story. So this is, as I said, very classic, applies to just about any story you can come up with. A picture book story arc is very, very similar. We're not throwing this totally out the window, but it does have some unique features to make a picture book appealing to the age group. So take a look at this. All right, so this is a similar diagram, but it is customized for a picture book story arc. So the first thing I want you to notice is that the exposition is shorter and that the inciting incident happens sooner. The reason for this is two things. First of all, the purpose of an exposition is to introduce the main character and the setting. Well, a picture book has illustrations that can do all of that for us at a glance. In an instant, we can see the setting, we can see the main character, so we don't need a lot of that narration at the beginning. It's also important because our target audience are 4 to 8-year-olds. And I don't know about you guys, but I know that that age group doesn't have a huge attention span. So they are ready to get into the story. They are ready to see what's going to happen. They are not interested in a long, drawn out introduction to the story. So the inciting incident needs to happen quickly. In fact, I would say the exposition should take about a page or two. Often in the first sentence or two, you get to the inciting incident in a picture book. And I'm going to show you an example of that in just a bit. The next stage in a picture book story arc is the rising action. And the first thing you should notice here is that it is big and it takes up the majority of this diagram. It is a zigzag because we want to see the main character sort of try and fail, try and fail, try and fail. Often we use the rule of 3 here. It's not really a rule. It's just kind of common to see 3 different sort of episodes here where the tension rises. But I also just want to point out that it doesn't have to be try and fail 3 times. It could be that they're building on progress throughout this part of the story. Or maybe the inciting incident is a problem and we just see things getting worse and worse and worse. And that's the rising action. It's anything in this section that is tension building and is going to keep the reader turning the next page and asking, well, now what? That's rising action. Now, in a picture book, that's the heart of a story, and it's going to take up the majority of the pages in your manuscript before you get to the climax. So the climax is the same as it was before. It's the turning point where the main character either reaches their goal or they're changed somehow as a person, as a character, but everything changes at this point. So the climax is still the same, but if you'll notice, it comes much later in this diagram. In the other diagram, it was sort of in the center. This time it's very, very close to the end because the climax is that aha moment for our 4 to 8-year-old readers. They're like, oh, that's how it ends. That's what happens. They've solved the problem. And after that point, that age group doesn't have a long attention span for like wrap up. They're like, oh, that's it. That's the end. And you're going to lose them pretty quickly. So, this falling action and resolution have been combined here. In fact, I have read multiple picture books where there really is no falling action. It's just resolution. So I have put on this diagram to combine them, but basically it's sort of just climax and then wrap things up very quickly. But I do want to point out that just because we're doing it quickly doesn't mean that it shouldn't still leave the reader with that satisfied feeling. In fact, with picture books, I would say it's even more important that we do that because these should be rereadable. We want our picture books to be read again and again and again. And in order to do that, we want to leave that reader with a great feeling at the end of the story, a feeling of having read an excellent story. So it still has to have that emotional punch, that emotional impact at the end. It's just going to happen a little bit more quickly than in our original diagram. So, taking a look at these side by side, just to review one more time, our exposition is significantly shorter in a picture book story arc. Our inciting incident has to happen more quickly. The climax is still going to happen. It's just going to happen way later because we want to keep the focus on the rising action. Those young readers have to be continually engaged in wondering what's next, and that's rising action. And then the falling action and resolution are going to happen much more quickly than in a traditional story arc. So we are going to look at an example of this, and we're going to use one of my favorite picture books called Vampire Baby by Kelly Bennett, illustrated by Paul Meisel. So this is perfect in terms of the story arc that we just saw, and it's also just a really fun read. So here we go. This is my sister Tootie. Tootie used to be a cuddly, gaga, goo goo, I want my baba baby. Then, one night, she turned into Vampire Baby. All right. So we are 2 spreads into this story, 2 sentences, in fact, and we have reached our inciting incident. The problem is that Tootie is actually a vampire baby. And so it didn't take us long to get there, right? The exposition didn't tell us, all about the 2 being siblings and the house they live in and what the situation is. It's short and sweet and to the point and gets the reader into the action as quickly as possible. It happened when Tootie got teeth, 2 in one night. They were not teensy weensy, itsy bitsy baby teeth either. They were long, sharp, pointed fangs. Canines, the doctor said, most unusual. We should have known right then. Tootie sinks her fangs into everything. My toys, the furniture, my catcher's mitt, my bike tires, my superhero action figurines, and especially me. Youch, Tootie! No bite! Nothing is safe from Vampire Baby. You'd think I could just keep away from her, but it's not that easy. Tootie starts acting extra smiley and adorable. She gurgles and waves her chubby baby arms, begging me to hold her. She waits until I'm within fang range, and then... chomp! Youch, Tootie! No bite! So, right now, we're in the rising action. From the moment we learned she was a vampire baby till now, this has all been rising action. And if you notice, he's not really trying to solve the problem at this point. He's just showing us how bad that problem is and giving us examples of why he thinks she's a vampire baby. I had to convince Mom and Dad that Tootie really was a vampire baby. So now he's trying to solve the problem, right? He's taking action. He's going to try to get Mom and Dad to help him out with this. Your sister is not a vampire, Mom said. Biting is just a phase. I showed her some vampire pictures. What about her hair? You had funny hair when you were a baby too, Mom said. If Tootie isn't a vampire, then why are all of her favorite foods red? Blood red? Because your baby sister has good taste, Mom cooed. Don't you tooty woody. Vampire Baby smiled. Would Tootie chew newspapers if she wasn't a vampire? I asked Dad. Perfectly normal, Dad answered. And dog toys while the dog is chewing them? Dad shrugged. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about? Youch, Tootie! No bite! So things are escalating, right? They're getting a little bit worse. According to the books, vampires sleep during the day and stalk their prey at night. I set my alarm for midnight so I could catch Tootie in the act. Turns out I didn't need the alarm. Wah! Wah! If Tootie isn't a vampire, then why won't she sleep at night? I yelled. Your sister is not a vampire, Mom yelled back. She's hungry. And take off that garlic necklace. Since Mom and Dad wouldn't believe the truth about Tootie, I was going to have to deal with Vampire Baby myself. I waited for the perfect opportunity. It was shopping day, and Mom had a long, long list. Don't worry, I'll take care of Tootie, I told her. We'll be in the costume section. First, I dressed Tootie in a Dracula cape and combed her hair. Then I gave her the sign I'd made. Here, hold this. Wanted, good home for Vampire Baby. We were turning onto aisle 13 when I spotted them. Their collars were turned up, their hair was slicked back just like Tootie's. Look, Tootie, a vampire family. Exactly what I was hoping for. Now smile and look cute. Tootie smiled. The vampire family smiled back. Look, Tootie, fangs just like yours, I said. Tootie waved her sign. The vampire mother waved back. Her fingernails were blood red. Look, Tootie, red. This is your lucky day. A vampire baby like you belongs with a vampire family. Tootie giggled. What an adorable baby, said the vampire father. What's your name? The vampire mother asked, tousling Tootie's hair. Tootie gurgled. I told them her name. The boy vampire waggled his fingers as if he was playing the tickle game. Hello, cutie wooty tootie, he cooed. Tootie smiled her extra adorable baby smile. Want to come homey womey with Asi Vasi, he sang. She gurgled and waved her chubby baby arms at him. The boy vampire leaned in close, then closer. And you notice how they're raising the tension there. That's how we know this is the peak of the rising action. Chomp! Ah! Yow! Ow! Bad baby! He yelled, holding his nose. Bad, bad baby! Tootie scrunched up her face and let out a squall. Back off, bat boy, I said, scooping Tootie up, and watch how you talk to my little sister. This is the climax, folks. This is where the main character changes his mind, changes his point of view, things turn around completely, all because of this scene with the vampire boy. So if you notice, everything from where we found out she was a vampire baby all the way up to now has been rising action. It's either showing us how bad things are, things getting worse, him eventually trying to solve the problem, getting his parents involved, and finally taking her to the grocery store and trying to find her a new family. It's not until the vampire boy sort of threatens her or talks to her in a way that Big Brother doesn't approve of that he changes his mind. That's what turns things around here. Okay, so if we're following this, it should be time for our falling action and resolution. Tootie may be a vampire baby, but she's my vampire baby. Chomp. And that's it. Do you see how quickly they wrapped that up? So right as soon as we saw that he had changed his mind, there's no reason to expand on that at all. We saw that he loved his sister in that moment. It was a very clear way to see that. And so all we had to do here is kind of leave the reader with that nice, heartwarming feeling. And a little bit of humor at the end there too. If you enjoyed Vampire Baby, I will pop the purchase link in the description below. And if you're writing a picture book with a narrative structure, don't forget that rising action is where it's at.